Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Taylor Code, and thank you for the lovely introduction, Felice, and thanks for to Cam for putting all this together. And to answer the question, my family was first impacted by incarceration. My dad actually spent a couple of years in prison. I remember visiting him in county jail while I was 7. I'm not exact. I don't remember exactly what he went to prison for. I think it was drugs. But it really had a huge impact on our family. It left me without a father, so I'm a child of 3. I'm the youngest, and I'm the only boy. I'm a man now, but back then I was the only boy, and so there was like a certain toughness that I didn't have that young boys inherit from men. So I was bullied a lot, you know, growing up as a young person. Um, so without that stable male figure in the household, I really struggled a lot, as a young black male trying to find my way, in this world. And my 2 sisters, they're 13 and 16 years older than myself. They also their kids are about the same age as me. So I have a niece and a nephew that's only 3 and 4 years younger than me. So without having a male figure in the household, and I'm expected to kind of be the protector of my niece and nephew, I really had a whole bunch of difficulty adjusting to, life as being a quote unquote man of the house at 7 years old, without, my dad being there.
Well, my name is Lakedra Blaylock again, and thank you again to Cam for this conversation that is very necessary. I first encountered incarceration. I was 9 years old the first time that I visited my biological father on the Darrington unit. I remember his mom, my grandmother, and his stepfather came to pick me up, and I was living with my great grandparents at the time. Didn't know what to expect. We had a lot of anxiety. Didn't know that's what it was called. I was just feeling really nervous. And so we entered this prison, this huge place, and my great grandparents always protected me. So I never encountered going into a prison or a jail, and it was really foreign to me. But then here comes this man who looks exactly like me, in all white, and he's shackled. And then he come into the visitation area, and they unshackle him, and we have a conversation. Basically, I sit there, and I don't know what's really going on. All I know is they say he's my dad, and I believe him because he looked like me, and he's in prison. And that was the first time I'd ever been in a prison my entire life. I sat there, I kind of listened to the adults have a conversation, but as I left, there were so many things going on inside of my 9-year-old mind. I didn't know exactly how to verbalize it. But as I got older, I think what happened is that I took all of the things that were going on with me at 9 years old, and I carried them into adulthood. Meeting the wrong men, looking for acceptance, feeling rejected, not feeling good enough. Because as I began to get older, I felt like my father, why didn't I mean enough to him to stay sober, to not choose drugs over me, and to stay out of prison? And it wasn't until maybe a few years ago that I truly understood that the things he was dealing with had absolutely nothing to do with me. And so that encounter, that day when I went to the Darrington unit, started my contact with prison and prison life as I knew it.
My name is Kyle Matthews, and I'd like to thank you all for having me here on your panel. And I was the loved one that started the criminal justice cycle in my family. I first got locked up in 1992 when I was 17 years old and didn't learn my lesson. I got out and got progressively worse in what I did. Now, I came out of a domestically violent household that made me more and more violent in my dealings with society. And ultimately, when I was 19, I committed a series of crimes that landed me in prison for the next 23 and a half years. But through my journey in prison, I learned not only to think for myself, but to help others along the way with their struggles. Because a lot of people in prison are considered, like what Joe Clark said and Lean On Me, incorrigible, irredeemable, but they are. And I take it upon myself to bring public awareness that those people that do go to prison can come out and be better and be productive in society. However, society has to have an open heart and open arms with the same zeal as it does to lock people away for long periods of time. I deal with a lot of gang members. I deal with a lot of mentally ill people, and some of them I consider my friends, my brothers, and my sisters. So I don't turn my back on anyone. I just try to bring awareness to the plight that lock them up, throw away the key doesn't work, because people do come home, and if they're not prepared to succeed out here in society, it's going to be a nightmare for someone else, and that's what we want to stop.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you talk through how you feel the community as a whole is impacted by incarceration in general? Broad question.
Yeah, that's pretty broad. I mean, I'll do my best. Well, the way that incarceration affects community as a whole is a lot of our youth grow up without the guidance that they need. They start looking to for love and guidance and mentorship and acceptance in a lot of places that are inappropriate. You know, that will actually have you in situations that you didn't want to be in. And take my story for example. With my father not being around, I started looking at the guys in the streets. In order to get some kind of idea of what a man is and what does manhood entail, what does it involve, and the idea that I was receiving from society around me being, the environment that I was in was, it was a lot of broken homes. It was an extremely oppressed community. The crack epidemic of the 80s in South Central Los Angeles. So it was very hectic. So the idea of manhood that was impressed upon me in the environment that I came up in was about how much you could hurt a person, or how many women you could take to bed, or how much fast money could you get. And I internalized a lot of those things. So growing up, I wasn't good, and I wasn't the best partner in a lot of my intimate relationships. When I eventually, I was incarcerated, through juvenile and into adulthood. I left a daughter. So I'm a father of 4. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. I'm 40 years old. My daughter, my oldest child is 20. My daughter, Destiny, she's 20. And I got incarcerated while she was 2, almost 3. And when I came back, she was 10. So I was gone for almost 7 years. And my absence out of her life, not only did it create hardships for her mother to take care of her, but it also created hardships for her in terms of the way that she connects with male figures, and that's the same for a lot of young people. Like, I was fortunate enough to go back to work for the organization that helped me turn my life around, Street Poets, and I did a lot of creative writing and poetry workshops in the juvenile detention facilities, and it was like walking into a room full of mirrors. It was like it felt like I was hearing my story being repeated over and over and over again. Some of the details would change. I mean, obviously, because we all have our own, stories and individuality in the way that we react to different circumstances. But and as Kyle was saying, incarceration, lock them up and throw away the key, it doesn't work, because, people, believe it or not, receiving 25 or 30 years, it's not the end of the world for a lot of people. They'll be back. They get out, and what I heard Kyle referring to about, society not having open arms to welcome people back, that really just perpetuates the cycle. And at Street Poets, we kind of talked about initiation. You know, there are 3 stages of initiation. You know, the ordeal. You know, whatever it is that you're going through. No, I'm sorry. It's the separation, being separated from your community or society, you know, your family. And then there's the ordeal that you go through when you're celebrated. And then there's the return, you know. And as a society, it's like we've forgotten how to do the return part. The return in the stages of initiation, the return or the welcoming is the most important part of that cycle, because it's supposed to be understood that this person went away and went through his ordeal, but now he has some kind of tools that are of value to the community now, which he or she can come back to the community and use what they've learned through going through these ordeals and help bless the community, help bring up the next generation of leaders, you know, with some very powerful tools. But I don't want to get to rambling and all that, but oh, go ahead.
Okay. I think the effect that it has on I think Taylor said it perfectly, because a lot of times they think if you give a person 30, 50 years in prison, but you don't provide them with resources while they're there, all you've done was warehouse someone. You haven't addressed any of the issues. You haven't addressed any of the problems that have sent them to prison. All you've done was warehouse them, and then when the time is up, or you feel, or there's a group of people feel that they're ready to come back to society, you send them back the same way basically they went in. And what they've done, and to me, I think it's worse, because you put them in an environment for 20 years with other people that are coming from so many other ordeals that they're dealing with, so many different situations. So now you have all these different personalities and situations that have been warehoused for all this time, and so they picked up. So now I went in as a thief, but now I know how to be a murderer. I know how to be a great manipulator, because I've been in that environment, and those are the tools that were required of me. So then you send me back into society, expecting me to operate like I've been in society the entire time, and that's unfortunate. And then you send me back to a family who don't even know who I am. They come in for maybe a visit 2 hours a week or 2 hours a month, and some never have visits because you sent me up in the panhandle, and my family unfortunately can't afford to even get there to see me. So there's not been any real human contact, and then you send me back to my family in order for me to integrate and function with them. And that is just, it's not going to happen. It's impossible. So now you have this daughter who's excited about her dad coming home, and he's excited too, but he doesn't even know me. He doesn't know how to communicate with me. He hasn't been equipped with the skills to even just function in a conversation, dialogue. And so he becomes frustrated, the family member becomes frustrated, and then either he becomes more introverted, or he resorts to the things that probably led him back to prison in the first place. And so now, then you have me, the daughter, who's saying, just why can't he just stay out? Why can't he just stay out? It's that simple, but actually it isn't. It isn't. If we put as much energy into locking them up, spending the money and the resources to keep them warehoused for 25, 30 years, we need to spend just as much money, time, and resources while they're in prison, actually rehabilitating them, actually providing programs that are effective, that have results that we see that have helped, and actually providing reentry services and partnering with organizations that can help them and be available for them when they come out. But not just for him, but for the family as well. Because you come out to me, you're not employable, you can't get a job, you come stand with me, I'm already in a poverty-stricken situation, and now that just puts more frustration on top of the situation. And now you have all of these things that the individual is dealing with, on top of trying to find a job, trying to fulfill their parole stipulations. There's just so much that they deal with. And as a community, it affects you, because if you don't properly prepare a person coming out of prison, but you put time and you have all these boards and legislators that put all of these laws in place, but you don't properly prepare them, you're going to deal with that offender again. And it's probably going to be at the gas pump when you're with your family coming from the movies. And all he's trying to do is feed his. He doesn't want to reoffend, but he just wants to provide for his family, And and sometimes you say, well, he had a choice. No, he didn't when he went on 15 jobs and everybody told him no. So, I mean, it affects the community on so many levels. And people think because they haven't directly dealt with incarceration that it's not their issue. But it is. It is.
I'd like to deal with the psychological dehumanization and institutionalization that a lot of men and women go through while they're incarcerated, because it gets to the point to where the phrase that is coined is the point of diminishing returns. You can spend so much time in prison to where it becomes normalized. Everything that you go through, everything that you do, everything you see, smell, touch, it becomes internalized, which thus is called institutionalization. So now, there are very few, one that I know of in TDCJ, Texas Department of Criminal Justice, where you get to talk openly about the crime you committed and why you did it. You see, there are men and women who spend decades in prison who don't understand why they did what they did. A lot of people can't put one and one together to get two, that domestic violence led to them committing whatever crime that they committed. A lot of people can't verbalize why they were sexually assaulted as a child and they wound up a sexual predator themselves. You see, so people go to prison, and another adage, you do in Rome as the Romans do. In some places it's a madhouse. And when I was young, I just fell right in with what was going on. So as I got older, I was lucky enough to have some mentors to lead me the right way. But it's a process, it's a growing process. A lot of guys that are incarcerated young, they're referred to as state raised. I refer to myself as being state raised because going as a teenager and coming out in my middle age, you know, I understand more about prison than I do about society. It's always going to be a learning process. And myself, personally, I have to make sure that a lot of things I did in prison, I don't do out here. I have to unlearn a language. There's an entirely different language in institutions. And I can be talking sometime to people and they're like, what do you mean? What is that word? You know, well, you don't know, excuse me. But it's more of a psychological warfare than it is anything. You have people at every turn, guards, administrators. You ain't nothing. You're an animal. You're a slave in Texas. So you compound this day after day after day with the pressures and the stressors of just going through prison life. Some people don't pop in there. They pop out here. Like Lakedra said, everybody doesn't commit a crime out of want to. It becomes a need. So if you don't have the qualifications, everyone can't go to college. Everyone can't get a GED in prison due to whatever sentence and circumstances they have. Sometimes you might want to, but you have such a large sentence, by the time you get close, you don't want to go. That's just not your thing anymore. So now that individual comes out, no skills, no employable skills, can barely communicate. So now there's no training how to interview for a job, how to write resumes, how to get dressed. There's none of that deals with reentry. And that's part of the dehumanization of it. So light has to be shed on what is incarceration. So if we just go to the root word of the penal system, you're paying penance. But penance isn't being paid. You're trying to survive at all costs. And a lot of people bring that survivor's attitude out here to society, and things go haywire when they cannot simply function out here. And as a result, they wind up committing a new crime. And I won't take up all the time, but I'll just use myself for an example. When I got locked up, there was no internet. So I got dropped off out here in society in 2018. I had to learn how to use the internet, smartphone, everything that comes with that. And I know if it frustrated me, I know guys who are madder than me, that they come out just, So there has to be some mitigating factors to where we can ease the transition for people coming out of prison.
Yeah, totally. When I was first released, I caught myself actually thinking, I consciously caught myself thinking like, wow, it's easier to survive in prison than it is in society. You know, and when you beat down like that from the prison experience, if you know there's no saving grace involved somewhere along the line, it's just a matter of time before you're right back in there because of the effects of institutionalization. But yeah, so yeah, Cal definitely hammered that one all the way home.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Can you talk through what our priorities should be to think about if a priority is decreasing the rate of incarceration, especially amongst people of color, where we should be focusing our energy and efforts?
Well, this is definitely a complex issue. So, you know,
Not something we're solving tonight?
no, that's not what I was saying at all. What I wanted to make sure is like, you know, we each gonna have an input on this one, like, but you know, like opportunity or lack thereof has a lot to do with it. You know what I mean? While I was young, a lot of the because my family and we didn't really have money to keep me dressed in the clothes that my peers were dressed in. And I was ostracized because of that. So that ostracization basically drove me to a life of crime. I went from being a valedictorian to a felon, like over the course of a summer. You understand what I'm saying? Because I could not stand up under all that pressure of 9, 10 kids all at the same time talking about my clothes in the classroom and still stay focused and do my work. You know what I mean? So through circumstances like that, I was driven to a life of crime. And looking back on a lot of the crimes we were committing, that I was committing and involved in as a juvenile, it was just to get a nice pair of shoes here, a couple of pairs of pants there. So it's like, wow, I'm out here taking penitentiary chances, you know, for like $200-$300. You know what I mean? But had I had the right mentors in my life, like, hey man, you out here risking your freedom, you know, so that you can go have a night of fun, you know, have a nice outfit on and maybe have some money to get some food or put something on some weed or a little drink, whatever. But if you just stay this course and go get this, you know, associate's degree or get this, you know, mechanical certification or whatever from this trade school or whatnot, you know, in 2 or 3 years, you'll make $100,000 a year. You know what I'm saying? You can do some things with $100,000. So a lot of us in these impoverished communities, we grow up having pipe dreams, thinking, you know, because there's no opportunity or the opportunities that are out there, they're not, you know, really. It's not laid out for us, you know, in a lot of times, you know, and then of course, you know, with the crack epidemics and other drug and the mental health problems. The support is not there as far as, like my mom. My mom was a diagnosed schizophrenic. She took meds. They had her on psych meds, Haldol and Cogentin, as far back as I can remember. And it was a lot for my sister to handle. My sister Janet, she was 15. She had a baby when she was 15. So she was taking, because my dad was away and my mom had her thing going on. She came and got me out of foster care. You know, when she was of age, she was 18 and became my legal guardian. So she's got a brother to take care of, and then she's got her own child to take care of. And then we got the mentally ill mom. You know, and all they want to do is give her meds, just stuff her full of meds all the time. So it was extreme pressure on my sister. You know, extreme pressure on me from my peers because of our, you know, financial situation. So we talking about, you know, resources, mentors, just, you know, telling these stories over and over again at times is like reliving the trauma. Right. It's like being re-traumatized at times, you know. And at times it affects me when I talk. It's like I can seem like I'm losing a point or losing my place in the conversation because sometimes it's just difficult to rehash through all of these things and just keep going and going and going and going and going, like, without it affecting me in some kind of way. So, please, viewers, and everybody, please excuse me if I feel like, I'm lost at times. But, this is the kind of baggage that, that we carry. This is part of what we have to work through in order to, not only show up for ourselves, but show up for our families, our children, and our communities, in terms of trying to be a productive member of society. So with that being said, I need you to build me up.
Okay. Yeah, I think when you talk about decreasing incarceration, I think there is a gamut of things that has to happen on so many different levels. And one of the things that I'm a true believer in is that it takes a community. We as a community have to step up. Just because we're not living in the impoverished neighborhoods, we shouldn't forget about them. And just because we make it out of the impoverished neighborhoods, that doesn't mean we should never go back and help. I think for me, with not ever being incarcerated, but dealing with a father who was incarcerated, I felt incarcerated a lot of times, even though my first time visiting him, I was 9 years old. But after that, everything I felt that he went through, I was affected by it. And because of the resources or the lack thereof that they provided for him and his crack addiction, and then his heroin addiction, and then his crack addiction, he came out the same man. And as a result, he came to live with me. So I'm taking on all of this, trying to make him better, trying to help him, trying to keep him sober. And it was a lot for me because I ended up, my father would take my car, my vehicle. I ended up going into crack houses, standing toe to toe with drug dealers to make him come out of the crack house, and then to get my vehicle back. And so at that point, I'm so frustrated. Now I'm ready to give up on him because I cannot, it's so much for me to deal with. So he needed resources. And then I would go to the parole officer. And ask for help. And they felt like not giving him a blue warrant was helping me, when I actually needed them to give me resources, help me fix this problem, help us with some tangible resources, because you're not sending him back to prison and sending him back home with me. I'm not professionally equipped to deal with this. And so it made it harder for me. So then I started dealing with issues. And luckily, I didn't resort to drugs or I didn't become incarcerated, but I started acting out in other ways, being in relationships that were not good for me, dealing with people who I felt like I wanted to save, because then I felt like I became a savior. I wanted to save him and everybody I came in contact with. I wanted to save, no matter how much it created havoc in my life. And so when we talk about decreasing incarceration, it's so many different elements and so many different moving parts to it. But I feel like as a community, we have to agree to do something and not just feel like it's our responsibility because we're in the I guess low income impoverished communities, or because it's our dad, or it's only affecting a certain group of people. Because at the end of the day, it affects everybody. And I think that's where we sometimes get lost, because we don't feel like it affects us if it doesn't affect us directly.
I'd like to talk about resources and energy. So first, the massive crime wave that has perpetuated the black community for decades, all the way back to slavery, kind of is a self-fulfilling prophecy. There are no resources. Now, I can speak to the modern times through a book called The Warmth of Other Suns, the migration of the black family from the south to the north to the east to the west. And I'll use two individuals that I read a great deal about that profoundly changed minority communities all over the world now that aren't from where they came from, if that makes sense. I'll start with Stanley Tookie Williams, one of the co-founders of the Crip Gang, and Rick Ross, one of the biggest drug dealers this nation has ever known. Stanley Williams was born in Louisiana. His mother was running from racial oppression. She didn't want her family around that. So she moved to Los Angeles, California. Stanley had a broken home, so to say, no father in the home, so he turned to the streets. And as he got older, he met with Raymond Washington, Crips were born, and now it's one of the biggest gangs on planet Earth. The energy that this young man and others who will later become Bloods or rival could have been steered the other way. But there was no capital investment in the community. You can and anyone can do this. Just Google when industry left certain cities and what did the crime rate do. There was always crime, but when industry left, crime went up. Because any animal, when it comes time to feed itself or house itself, is going to do whatever is possible to satiate that hunger and to make comfort of its situation. Rick Ross was born in Texas. Mother moved to Los Angeles. Rick Ross came up, I don't know the man, I can't speak for him, all I can do is go off what I've read in the interviews I've seen. However, was introduced to drugs. So he always wanted to be an entrepreneur, so what easier way? This is easy money. He didn't know it was gonna wreck 5 generations of black and brown people. He was just trying to make money. But as every generation stacks upon, there's still no capital investment. That's just money made and money lost, you see. So now, Rick Ross has the mind of an entrepreneur. If that energy could have been directed somewhere else, where it is now, fortunately, there's no telling where black America, where brown America, where even white America would be right now. But a lot of times people don't want to acknowledge that in just a basic algebraic equation, x plus y equals z, people want to take the y out. Why did this happen? Cocaine doesn't grow in the United States on a massive scale that it's sold. Nobody wants to acknowledge that. Guns don't get into the neighborhood. You can't go to the gun store and get the amount of artillery we always had access to. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And last but not least, other communities never want to acknowledge the why it happens over there and want to ask the question and tell themselves, well, we don't do that. We don't have to do that. You see, you're taking the blame out. It might not be you. It might not have been your direct ancestors. Somebody had a hand in that, you see, because even capitalism in its most basic form, we move industry, we can cut costs and save money, we'll move it to India. Well, what about your citizenry here? So, no capital investment, crime takes over, now you wind up with black communities all over America, impoverished, crime-ridden. There's a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but nobody knows what to do with it. We have a lot of bad habits with our money. Mainly, we're not financially educated. A lot of people get money and don't know what to do with it, and it's gone in the wind. And people like to laugh at us. Oh, why do they buy that? Why do they get this? Why do they do that? Lack of financial education. They don't teach it in school. So if you do come across a bundle of money, it's going to the clubs, going to the cars, going around your neck. You see? So, and which winds up being a waste. So now the people who do want to invest their ill-gotten means, now law enforcement, here we come. You see? So if we can get capital investment into these communities, I guarantee you crime would stop and slow down. But on the other side of that coin, and I don't want to just start droning, who loses out on that? You don't need as many police officers. You don't need as many district attorneys. You don't need as many judges. So they're going to fight for their positioning because they have skin in the game. So someone has to suffer for their benefits.
Yeah, and when they do, when black people were doing the right things with the money, you have things like Black Wall Street. You see what happened in Black Wall Street. But it's really interesting that you connected those dots, saying how Stanley Tookie Williams and his mom came from Louisiana, and Rick Ross came from Texas. So my dad was from Shreveport, Louisiana. My mom was from Huntsville, Texas. They were both worked at Hobby Airport, and so when they left to LA, they moved to LA for the factory jobs,
Right.
and and that's where I was born and raised in LA.
Right.
So yeah, that's really. Yeah, that was just a really interesting coincidence, but
Yeah, so we have a little less than 20 minutes left. I have 2 more questions, and I
Okay.
want to make sure we end on kind of a positive note.
okay. Can I just say one thing about resources?
Yes.
So, one of the, we say, what do you need resources? Well, like for me, one of the most important resources that was in my life that helped me to make a transition, it was actually having friendships and relationships with people who didn't come from my background, white people or, Spanish people. Because what that did for me, it took me out of my element, and into a whole different side of the city where I got to saw more than just, my 5 blocks of chaos. And because there were, consistent shootings and stabbings and things like that in those communities, it gave me a chance to take a deep breath and kind of like look around and begin to have the capacity to visualize a life for myself outside of that madness. You know what I'm saying? Because you could bring a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink it. So with all the young people that we work with, or, not just young people, but also adults, returning citizens, people returning from the community, if there has to be buy-in from them, they have to have something to buy into. If we don't have anything for them that would allow them to be a co-author of a different kind of vision, then it's going to be really hard to create a better society. You know what I mean? And so for me, those were one of the most important resources because like you said, you can have all the money in the world, whether it's ill-gotten or not. But if you don't know what to do with it, or if you don't have some kind of vision for the money or whatever resources, it almost kind of defeats the purpose. So.
And so maybe we can skip ahead and just, I'd love to really get specific and for each of you to maybe talk specifically about what some of those resources have been for you. I know, Taylor, you've worked with this group Street Poets. Obviously, Lakedra, you're involved with the Texas Inmate Family Association. I mean, can you all really, let's do some name dropping. What resources do exist in the world that can be available for some of these communities that either have impacted you or that you're involved with in some way. I think, again, we're not gonna solve the world's problems tonight, but if we can direct some people to some of these resources and talk a little bit about the impacts that they've had on you and also, the work that they're doing, I think that could be really helpful for our community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. I came through an organization called Street Poets Inc. It's a poetry-based peacemaking organization in Los Angeles, and I got involved with that organization while I was incarcerated as a juvenile in a probation camp. And so the founder, Chris Henriksen, it was through my relationship with him and all the supporters of Street Poets where I started to make those, I first began to make some positive changes in my life. Those relationships opened up doors for me to have jobs that I normally wouldn't have gotten, would have gotten. I did production assistant work on commercial shoots. I ran a mailroom for an integrated media company. And so that's where I was meeting all these other different people, in these different parts of the world that would really just like open my mind up to different things. Now the poetry came into play because when I got involved with the poetry, I was really just trying to polish my skills as a gangster rapper. Growing up in LA, I was living a life, and gangster rap and everything about being a gangster was real mainstream at the time. And so just like a lot of lost youngsters out there, I wanted to cash in on it, you know. So in my earlier material, all I pretty much did was glorify the streets. I wasn't peeling the layers back and, you know, being vulnerable and really exposing, you know, letting my wounds breathe. And so I was just glorifying the street life and whatnot. And so Chris asked me a very important question. One of the most important things I was ever asked in my life at the end of one of the classes. He was like, you know, man, you pretty much just writing about all this BS. You know, you're not really, you know, exposing who you are underneath all these different facades. So he was like, who were you? What was your life was like underneath all this? But that was a too painful of a place for me to go at the time. You know what I mean? I actually didn't go there until like 8-9 years later, when I was facing double life in 130 years because I was involved in a bank robbery that went bad. You know, I ended up taking a deal for 25 years. When I got sentenced, they gave me 16 of it. So while I was in prison serving, you know, my portion of the 16 years, I noticed, I was like, man, it's a whole lot of people that keep getting out and coming back. Like, you know, after I was there for like 2, 3, 4 years, you know, I'm seeing dudes who had done 10 and 15 years back within 6 weeks. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. Like, because, you know, in prison, everybody's, you know, it's like, oh man, I'm changing my life, you know, God this, Allah, you know, Jesus this, Buddha that, you know what I mean? All the gods you can think of, you know what I mean? And so every time I saw a person come back, especially like, you know, people who seem to be real solid on the, you know, real solid in their transformation and on the spiritual tip, and you see them come back like, so, you know, and sometimes they were coming back not just on parole violations, but with a fresh case. Like, you know, so you got to do this whole thing. Like, you know, that was the scariest thing about prison to me. You know what I mean? And every time I saw that, it was like God whispered to me, you better get it right. You better fix what's broken in you. Otherwise, you might as well get you a shot of coffee and kick back because this is what it's going to be like. So you got all these different kind of dudes doing life on an installment plan. That's what we say. You know, you like, damn, you doing life, 2 years here, 3 there, 5 there. So I wrote a poem that really saved my life. You know what I'm saying? I connected, in this poem, I connected the dots to my story and understood. It helped me just come to terms with, you know, why I lived a certain way, why I made certain choices, why it was so easy for me to put myself in situations where I would not only hurt others, but also jeopardize my freedom and, you know, and even injure my family by creating a broken home by going to prison. So, so writing this poem, it helped me to stop blaming everything outside of me for my circumstances. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's definitely things that have taken place that have impacted, you know, communities of color in ways. But at the same time, you're supposed to find that strength and that groundedness to still be accountable for whatever your actions are. I mean, think about it. If you look at the NBA, you know, the Lakers lose a game, you don't hear LeBron James saying, oh, they was doing this, the defense was doing this, and, you know, he just said, you know, they always approach it from a place of accountability. Mm-hmm. So, you know, me writing this poem, writing that piece, it helped me start to really begin to approach my life from a place of accountability regardless of what happened to me. So now we're talking about having an outlet, a positive outlet, because if we just hold everything in, at some point it's going to blow up and it's going to start spilling into other areas of your life where it's totally inappropriate and it's going to wreck everything. Like I went from, you know, having 1,500 shares of stock in a film production company to being in prison with, you know, and so that I, just for my own sanity, I had to figure out how that happened. You know what I'm saying? But thankfully, you know, Chris and Street Poets, they were still in my life and they still saw me as somebody, like, even though you made this mistake and you went through what you went through and you learned things, you know, they were sending me books, a lot of self-help and cognitive psychology material to read. You know, I was still pumping my poetry out and, you know, they reading my material in criminal justice Sundays at the churches and, you know, still keeping me tied and connected to the community. So I'm not being viewed as a liability that's coming out of prison. You know, I'm being viewed as an asset. You know what I mean? Like you have something that, you know, a lot of us, okay, yeah, bam.
Yeah. So resources. So as we said early on, I am the executive director of Breaking Chains, Making Amends. That was actually founded by who I love to call my bonus dad. He retired Senior Warden Vernon Pittman when he was on the WIN unit. And what it does is it provides scholarships to the children and grandchildren of the incarcerated individual or the victim of the crime. So we use Breaking Chains as an outlet. Not only is the community able to donate to BCMA, but also the offenders. And the offenders, they donate from their inmate trust fund. And what it does, it makes them feel accountable, but also it makes them feel like they are contributing to a society that they took so much from. And so it provides a way for the generational cycle of incarceration to be broken through education. So we're able to provide scholarships to the children or the grandchildren. They will apply. And not only that, one of the things we require is that they kind of pay it forward. So then they become a mentor to the next individual who receives a scholarship from BCMA. So we do that scholarship piece, and then we have a mentorship program that's pre and post incarceration. And our mentorship program is only comprised of individuals that have been incarcerated. So they can actually identify with the men and women when they go in prison, and then when they come out, they can help them through the transitioning process. And of course, TIFA, Texas Inmate and Families Association, where I am the Houston chapter chair. One of the things that they do is that they provide support for the families that are here that have the loved one that is incarcerated. They advocate in Austin during the legislative sessions. Right now, they're working on the earned time credit as well as independent oversight bill. So they provide that service to those who are members of TIFA and also people, just the community as well. And so I know that those two resources are very important. Also, the city of Houston has a robust reentry program that many people don't even take advantage of. It's free. All they have to do is reach out to that program, call them, and then they will be able to provide you with mental health resources, jobs, employment, marketing skills, resume building, interviewing skills, and they'll even provide you with clothes so you can go on the interview. So those are some of the resources that we have here.
Some of the resources I was exposed to, most of it came while I was incarcerated through my family. Before my mother passed away, she kept me almost with a bookshelf like this behind us, with just books of all kinds. My father, my sister Aisha, they helped lay the groundwork for me not to just be in prison the whole time. So I kept a foot out the door for the most part. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine one time, and this was just out of the blue. And I remember it like it happened just 5 minutes ago. He said, "Cuz, you need to make up your mind before you go home whether you're going to be a criminal or you're going to be a civilian. You can't do both." And this was before I turned 30, and I still have a long way to go. But he saw something in me, some potential that I had to capitalize on. So I earnestly started going to education. I wound up getting an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree in behavioral science while I was incarcerated. And I actively try to use what I learned in those courses out here. So it's dealing with sociology, the social, and the psychology, the mental, of not only myself, but society at large. Because our social structure is fractured. And a lot of the fracturing comes from people like myself, people like Taylor, who've done wrong, but we're trying to make amends and do right. Because my ultimate goal is to choke off the pipeline to prison. So, thank you.
All right. Any last notes or thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, I definitely want to reiterate the importance of having that family support, because definitely can't do it at all. You know, my sister Janet, my niece Raven, my sister Stephanie, you know, just my family. You know, my oldest daughter's mom. You know, she was there. She hung in there for as long as she could too. So it definitely takes a village to help someone get to a place where they can go through that transformation, where you can afford to go through the transformation. Because, man, if you caught in a place where you're always in survival mode, is, you know, yeah, but definitely shout out to those, and shout out to everybody out there that's supporting somebody that's locked up, you know, that's there for them, whether it's through, you know, finances or, you know, moral support, or, you know, you just keeping them fed with something that's good for their mind and their spirit. You know, definitely big ups. Please continue to do that, and please, you know, just people of all backgrounds, let's all come together and reweave the fabric of all the communities. You know, let's make it all inclusive for everybody, because when you got a part of town over here that's so hectic that nobody wants to go to it, you know, but then it's like, oh, it's prime real estate because it's located to a lot of, you know, it's located to a lot of landmark, you know, attractions. Then that's when they start coming up with things called gentrification. They want to, you know, get people up out of it. So, you know, so let's come together and get it all right, people. That's all I'm trying to say.
I think for me, one last statement is just that don't think that you just always know you're worth more than all the trouble you've been through. Don't ever let your situation or circumstance define you or feel like you're not worthy to sit at the table or be in the room, because you are.
And I definitely want to say sorry about that, guys. I want to shout out to the Anti-Recidivism Coalition out there in Los Angeles. You know, they helped turn they helped change some laws that got a lot of people who got sentenced to life as a juvenile. They helped get those people out. So you got a lot of people that's getting out of prison, you know, that's coming out with degrees, bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, like Kyle here, that's really ready to be a service to their community. And the Anti-Recidivism Coalition is helping them out with job opportunities, housing, and everything. So shout out to ARC, Scott Budnick, Elizabeth Calvin, and that whole family there.
Let's use our power to make change. Let's use our resources and energy to make change, because eventually we're going to have to make up our mind whether we want rehabilitation or we want revenge. Right now we're on the revenge path. The revenge path creates what we have now, a cycle of recidivism, a cycle of repeat violent offenders, and a cycle of billion-dollar industry. Because for those of you who don't know, who will now know, more money is spent on the prison industrial complex than it is in K through 12 education in this country. So I'll leave you with that to chew on. Thank you.